Test.
Test. Okay, we will start now. Hello and welcome everyone to today's event, Rafah, What's at Stake, jointly organized by Palästina Kampagne and Egyptian Diaspora Resists. We are glad to see you here today, despite the fact that we announced the event only 2 days ago. And I also extend a warm welcome to those joining us online in our live stream today. I'm Caro from Palästina Kampagne, and I will be moderating tonight. So maybe first a few words about the organizing groups. Palästina Kampagne is a Berlin-based activist group that formed 2022 under the name of Nakba 75 after the first Nakba demonstration bans, and started out as a campaign to educate about the Nakba in the context of its 75-year anniversary. And ever since has turned into a general campaign that seeks to foster solidarity with Palestine in Germany. And Egyptian Diaspora Resists is a leftist organization that aims to organize and mobilize Egyptians in the diaspora and the exile who are looking for a medium to practice organized political action. And it has currently 3 chapters in Berlin, New York, and London, and which have been engaging in the Palestine solidarity movement in those past months, based on the conviction that the Palestinian question lies at the heart of the Egyptian question. And before we start, I have 2 announcements to make. The first one is that there's the demo on Saturday organized by Global South United, Thara in Hamburg, Handala Leipzig, and Palästina Kampagne. It starts at 2 p.m. at Neptunbrunnen, so next to Alexanderplatz, so I hope to see you all there. And the second announcement is that there is the Palästina Congress taking place from the 12th to the 14th of April in Berlin. It's a congress organized by different individuals of different activist groups in Berlin, and there will be panels and workshops about the history of Palestine, about the situation here in Germany, with a focus on the repression of Palestine solidarity and on arms exports. And there will be also a tribunal in which we discuss to what extent Germany might be complicit with the crime of genocide in Gaza. And last but not least, there will be room to discuss and strategize together as a movement how we can further the Palestinian cause in our schools, in our universities and workplaces. So if you haven't already gotten your tickets, you can do so after the event over at the entrance. And with that, let's start. As you all know, the Israeli army has been bombing Gaza since October. And in the recent weeks, we have increasingly turned our attention to Rafah on the Egyptian border, where in the last month, more and more Palestinians have been displaced to, and currently there's over 1.5 million Palestinians sheltering there with nowhere safe to go. And today we want to explain a bit what Rafah is, what is going on there, and what's the current threat there of an attack and what we can do. And to this end, we have invited 3 amazing guests. There is Yara, who's active in Berlin and is part of the Palästina Kampagne. We have Bishoy, who is also from Berlin. He's a software engineer and a political activist from Egyptian Diaspora and Resists. And we have Lina Attalah joining us live today from Cairo. Lina is a journalist from Egypt. She is the chief editor of Mada Masr, which is an independent online Egyptian newspaper. operating currently in obviously very difficult conditions in Egypt, but she can tell us more about the great work that she's doing later in her input. So thank you very much, Lina, for being with us today, and thank you to Yara and Bishoy. We will start first with Yara, who will give us a short input about the situation in Rafah and how it came about. What is the threat of an attack on Rafah, and what we can do here in Germany. And then we will proceed with Bishoy, who will talk about the connection between Rafah and the military dictatorship in Egypt. And then we will have a slightly longer block with Lina, who will talk about political activism and freedom of the press in Egypt with relation to Rafah and Gaza. And then we close with Bishoy again before we open the space for discussion and your questions. So I give the word to Yara.
Yeah, thank you for, I hope you can all hear me, for coming, and thank you, Caro, for the introduction. I'll give a brief 10-minute input on the situation in Gaza and how it came about, as well as the role here of Germany and of us here in Germany. I think the first thing we have to look at is that I think it was very clear for many who know the being of the settler colonial state that is Israel, that shortly after the 7th of October, it was clear that there will be a genocidal onslaught on Gaza. It was made very clear by many of the Zionist leaders, defense ministers that had, cut off water, electricity a couple of days after, that were talking to the IOF soldiers that went into Gaza, saying that everyone's an enemy, and we have to eliminate everything. So I think that's was made very clear in the beginning, as well as what was made clear in the beginning is that there is this intention to push the Palestinians in Gaza further to the south, to Rafah. This was made very clear, I think, 6 days after the 7th of October. There was a policy paper on the 13th of the Zionist Ministry of Intelligence that outlined the preferable solutions for Palestinians in Gaza. And what it stated is that the preferable solutions for Palestinians in Gaza is that they be ethnically cleansed to Egypt. And it points to different points. What we've seen over the past 4.5 months, what we've witnessed is exactly what this was outlined. So it was clear that from the beginning, knowing the settler colonial Zionist state, that this is what will happen, and we've seen it play out since 4.5 months. So in this paper, they mentioned, for example, there will be tents at 10 cities in Rafah. Palestinians should not be allowed to return. There will be a buffer zone between Egypt and the Gaza Strip, and there will be enough pressure for the Egyptian regime to open their border, because we'll pressure the US and other European states, because we'll create such a dire humanitarian situation. And yeah, this is what we've seen. I mean, we've seen it from the very beginning that people were ethnically cleansed to the south. We have seen countless flyers coming from the sky from the IOF telling people to move south. And nowhere is safe in Gaza. I mean, we saw that when people were moving on Salah al-Din Street, which is a big street that connects the north to the south, that they were being bombed as well. So, yeah, that's sort of how 1 million people were pushed to the south. And I want to also focus on the north because yes, Rafah is being bombed currently also. And what's happening in the north is that it's being starved out. So we have around 400,000 Palestinians still in the north. And they're being starved out, which means that the World Food Program is not allowed, or is no longer entering food trucks. Because it's too dangerous. The UNRWA, we all know that the Zionist state said that Hamas people are in UNRWA and therefore there are no longer food trucks. But not only that, they are bombing, like strategically bombing farms or bulldozing farms, strategically bombing the greenhouses, and targeting people that are going out to search for food. So whether that's like fishing by the Mediterranean that are being targeted, or if it's just people going out to collect food that are being shot and targeted by snipers. So that's the situation currently we have in the north. And as I mentioned, we saw the people being ethnically cleansed to the south, where around, I think, 1.3 million Palestinians are at the moment. And Rafah is being bombed right now. I mean, this is not a zone that is safe, as we have seen. We've seen the Zionist state say that they will have troops in Rafah. There will be an offensive there starting maybe on 10th of March, starting the day of Ramadan. So this is something, if we look at it, actually is a clear continuation of the Nakba. It's not, this is actually what I think Zionist leaders themselves said, you know, there will be another Nakba in Gaza, and this is, we've seen someone who committed massacres in the Nakba in 48, a former IOF soldier in Deir Yassin, who mentioned, you know, who goes to these soldiers and tells them, don't leave anyone alive, kill them all. So this is a clear logic of the Zionist state, is to push these, to massacre these people, to massacre the Palestinians, and to push them to the south, and then eventually expel them so they can't return and they can settle in Gaza. And we've seen this, that this is the intention, especially of many settlers, of the soldiers that are there. So we've seen adverts of real estate companies showing that, you know, you can now soon buy a house in Gaza, and the soldiers themselves saying that they will return to the settlements. So this is how, I mean, this is sort of a clear logic, again, of the Zionist state, and it's something that Israel has been empowered to do by the US and by Germany. And Germany is complicit. I mean, we'll have a trial and so on, but for me it's very clear that Germany is complicit, because Germany is the second largest arms exporter after the US to the Zionist state. So without these arms, we wouldn't have seen this play out. We wouldn't have seen this onslaught. So it's clear that the Zionist state is being encouraged to do what they're doing by very materialistic supplies, but also besides the supplies, which have been increased tenfold since the 7th of October in Germany, and things like munition and so on are being supplied. And regarding to that, we also see that Germany said that they will intervene in the Criminal Court of Justice by the side of Israel, because they don't see any ground for a genocide happening. So this is what is happening, and this is how Germany is clearly complicit in abetting this onslaught. And this leads, of course, us to the question, what we here in Germany, what's our role and what's our responsibility? And we clearly have a responsibility. You know, most of us do pay taxes here, and most of us living here are somehow also complicit in this, and that means that we have to organize and fight even harder to disrupt the war machine and to disrupt the support. And I think this is what we've been trying to do, organizing in front of, you know, arms industry, whether it's Rheinmetall, which is a big arm producer. Most of the production companies are not in Berlin. Here the political decisions are made, whether or not arms are being distributed. And yeah, I think this is, I mean, maybe we can get into, you know, practices a bit more later, but this is sort of the overall, I think, yeah, situation. I mean, there's a lot more to say, but I think I have 10 minutes, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yara, for your input and also for laying the ground for the remaining inputs. So I would give the word to Bishoy now, and I would like to know, or we would like to know from you, how does the military dictatorship under Sisi in Egypt act currently with regards to Rafah or Gaza?
Yeah, so of course, like what was, first of all, I need to express to Lina on behalf of all of the Egyptian diaspora comrades our solidarity, and we thank the whole crew of Mada Masr for being our eyes and our ears in Egypt. So thank you very much for your great work. The main point, the main thing on the news currently is Rafah Crossing, which is, for people who might not know, it is the only borders that Gaza share with the outside world is with Egypt through the Rafah Crossing border. And what Egypt has been doing is that it has been sieging Gaza since 2007. Now that siege is manifested, and it's manifested in a very brutal way, like even more like before 7th of October, 500 trucks used to enter Gaza daily, now almost 20, and through Karm Abu Salim, and it's the manifestation of that siege is very brutal currently. And I think most of us heard in the news and saw the whole thing of the bribes of Al-Arjani and so on that Mada published a report on, that people has to pay to pass from Gaza to Egypt, and even the trucks, there was reports that the trucks has to pay bribes as well to Al-Arjani to allow it to enter to Gaza. But that's only like one part of what has been going on. So from before, since the beginning of the military coup and the rule of Sisi, the regime worked very hardly on isolating Gaza from its demographic and geographical normal extension, which is Sinai. So they launched a war under the name War of Terror in 2000 after the coup. They displaced many of the Egyptians who are in Sinai. So they isolated totally Gaza from its demographic and geographic extension, and basically Egypt lost its sovereignty over Sinai. They were not being able to control it except with militias that is running also by Al-Arjani, who is running the same company that takes the bribes. So that's one role. The other thing was being mediator during the aggressions on Gaza. So to give just a simple example, in 2014, just after the coup and after the electing Sisi, there was an aggression on Gaza as well from Israel. And Egypt proposed a ceasefire proposal, which was immediately accepted by Israel and immediately got refused by all of the Palestinian faction. And at that time, they described it as that it's a proposal to put the Palestinian faction on its knees in front of Israel. So yeah, Egypt, and later in 2019, they were part of the deal of reconstructing Gaza, which was a deal of 500 million. And of course, the company Sons of Sinai, which is owned by Al-Arjani as well, was the one who was benefiting from that deal, the one that took that whole deal. So yeah, so currently the Egyptian regime is continuing in sieging Gaza and in starving it and cutting the whole way over it.
All right, thank you. And could you maybe elaborate a bit more on what Sisi's position is on a possible expulsion of Palestinians to the Sinai desert or to Egypt?
So yeah, so the official stance of the Egyptian government is that they refuse that the expulsion, but of course that's some sort of a joke. So we have a lot of indication of what is really the intention of the Egyptian regime. One part we had like from 2 weeks, I think, reports on a buffer zone that the regime is building to welcome the flux of the Palestinian displacement, to welcome the flux of the Palestinians who will get displaced from Gaza. They built a huge wall, and at the end they started, like when the reports came out, the officials of Egypt came saying that that is just a logistical place for the humanitarian aid trucks to wait inside it. So, and yani, everyone knows that no one is building that much walls and making and flattening the earth just for a logistical area. And the other thing is, the other indicator as well is the clear weaponizing of the economical crisis that Egypt has now. So, for example, the reports was saying that the most two countries who were most likely will get bankrupted during 2024 was Ukraine and Egypt. And that economical crisis, the regime had put Egypt in it, not just because they are failures. There is clear intentions behind that. There was cut to it, like huge debts from the IMF that put Egypt on its knees as well. And there is a pattern in the Egyptian-Israeli history that they always try to sell what they will do with Israel through the economical welfare. So, for example, the peace accord or the Camp David Accord between Egypt and Israel was sold to people by saying that it will be the solution for the economical welfare and industrialization of Egypt. So that's a pattern that we can see where it's going and what they will do with the displacement of the Palestinians.
All right, thank you, Bishoy. We will now move a bit from the government response to the wider public or society in Egypt itself. So I would like to know from you, Lina, what does the Egyptian population know about the situation in Rafah, and how does it respond to that? Is there any activism happening on the ground? So I give the word to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much for having me on screen. It's also an honor to be with you virtually. So basically, Palestine activism in Egypt has been part and parcel of our political culture for years and years. It has been manifesting in different ways depending on also the political ecosystem of the moment, but it was never really not there. And I always keep reminding myself and people around me that Palestine activism in Egypt is not necessarily an act of solidarity, unlike the case elsewhere, perhaps in other parts of the world. It's more of an intersectional case. We feel a lot of the times that our fates are overlapping. I personally feel that my own fate as a journalist facing prosecution for our Gaza coverage is very much going to be determined by what happens in Gaza and in this war. So in a very weird kind of way, I personally started my activism with Palestine, was the second Intifada in the early 2000s, and today, if Mada shuts down or if I go to prison, all of this will be determined by what happens in the war. So just wanted to start by explaining how intersectional the Palestinian cause is to Egyptian politics, and we can go into that history in another moment of the why and how is that the case. But for right now, the manifestation of this intersection is facing a lot of challenges because we stopped having a political street for so many years, specifically for the last 10 years. Any street action has become very costly with time over the last 10 years. At the beginning of the war in Gaza, the authorities sanctioned some protests in solidarity with Palestine, but they were, largely controlled by the authorities. And when people started organizing away from the authorities to express, the stand for Palestine, soon enough there were arrests and everything we've seen in protests elsewhere, even though our government is supposedly not not against Palestine, if you compare it to other governments, or supposedly, let's say. So it has been really hard to organize street actions. But that being said, there have been attempts. There have been attempts to organize with the very small margins we have. So we have a group of women journalists who have been really trying hard to, keep actions going at the Journalist Syndicate, which is the only site of protest left for us nowadays. It makes me sad because this is the place that we used to protest at before the revolution, and then the revolution made us protest really pretty much everywhere, and now we are back to hardly being able to organize any action at this very same place. But also the most stifling thing about being in Egypt and not being able to engage in public actions in the streets is that we know that we are very close to the scene of the crime, to the site of the genocide, and we just have to live our life very normally given this proximity. This is the one thing that we're all struggling with. So for me and for many of us, the action that makes sense is not necessarily to protests in Cairene streets. Perhaps some of us will need to do that, but the more sensible act is to actually walk towards Rafah. And Rafah, there is the Palestinian Rafah and there is the Egyptian Rafah, and there is a border crossing in between. So the most sensible thing for me would be to be able to reach Rafah and be there, and be there with our bodies, which is, I always say it's our ultimate site of resistance, our bodies, be there. And this is a task that is close to impossible. In fact, since the war on terrorism started in 2013 in Sinai, the war that Bishoy has mentioned in his intervention, it has been close to impossible for people to go freely to the north part of the Sinai Peninsula. So, as Egyptians with normal IDs, we can't even reach Arish, which is further away from the border, which is the capital city of the northern Sinai governorate. We can't even go there, let alone reaching the border. We have been making a lot of demands that we need to reach the border as journalists. Access has been very, very limited for us, and as we have seen, the genocide has only been mediated by the very people who are being killed by it. We did not have the possibility of being there. So just to say that action is very limited given the political ecosystem that we are living under, which allows only its own engineered form of solidarity with Palestine, when the Palestinian cause for us is much more central stage to our polity and precedes far more this government and these authorities. So.
much. And could you maybe elaborate a bit more about the aspect of freedom of the press in Egypt, maybe also in particular in the context of reporting on Rafah?
So, I mean, the easiest thing to say is that since November of last year, rather than or besides me being able to fully focus on the coverage of the war, which has been, the main thing one can do at this point in time, I've also had to deal with a lot of hurdles with the justice system in Egypt, which usually instead of investigating, acts of corruption that we report about, people implicated in corruption, they go and investigate us for breaking the stories. So it's been yet another blow and insult to justice. But I guess there is no more justice with a genocide of this scope happening just next door. So just to give you an example, I've been facing those legal hurdles and these prosecutions for our coverage of what's happening in this war, and specifically the story that again Bishoy mentions, which is basically Egypt being put under pressure by different foreign players to accept the displacement of Palestinians from Gaza, knowing that, by the way, the quest to empty Gaza of its people and to relocate them to the Sinai Peninsula has been, a long-running plan that precedes this war. It goes as early as the 1950s, actually, during the tripartite aggression, with different bouts of trying to revive the plan. So, we simply reported about that, and we are being punished for it. And that gives you, a fragment of what happens in terms of overall, the ability of media organizations like ours to operate. It's tough. There aren't many of us out there able to operate. Those of us who are left are being put under more extreme pressures than ever before. But I also have to say, I always like to say that we all know that it's very bleak, the media freedoms, but I also feel that, to be able to be in my living room tonight, talking to you in freedom, and I'm touching wood, also means that there is a small margin that we have to, totally inhabit and fight to expand as much as we can. So even though we may seem to be, under intense, like immense pressure, and that's true, we are, but at the same time, we are able to operate, to wake up in the morning, to publish, to witness, to create a record for this criminality. And I guess the sheer fact that this continuity is there is a triumph for all of us. So we have to keep going. I'm afraid we don't have a luxury to just sit back and say we are under pressure, it's not working, and so on. So yeah, it's important to remember that it's bad, but we're still here. So.
All right. And could you maybe also tell us a bit about the role of Germany in Egypt and how that has been impacted maybe by the current situation in Gaza?
So obviously Germany is given its status in the European Union and in Europe. It goes without saying that it's a key economic and political ally to Egypt. So.
We can't currently hear you. We're trying to fix it. Sorry. Can you try say something again? Negative. And could you try again? Could you try to leave the call and rejoin it?
And now?
Yeah, you're back with us again. Great. Sorry for the interruption. Maybe I can repeat the question. We wanted to know what Germany's role is in Egypt and how that has been impacted by the situation in Gaza.
It's funny when you couldn't hear me anymore. I remembered this text I was reading. Basically. Fanon describing how France was jamming the signal whenever there was a radio transmission by the Algerian revolutionaries. So I felt like Germany maybe is jamming us all of a sudden. But I was trying to say that basically, given its position in Europe, it's no surprise that Germany is a major economic and political.
And you're gone again, unfortunately.
The Germans don't want you to say this.
Say again.
Just ask a question to someone else, and in the meantime, we'll call Lina by telephone.
All right, we can do that. Lina, you can hear me, right? Okay. So we would then skip this part for now, continue with Bishoy, and then at the same time we try to fix it and then continue with you again. I hope that's fine. Okay. Yeah, I hope it won't interrupt the flow too much, but I think it should work. So I would get back to you, Bishoy, and ask you what role do other Arab countries play in the oppression and the liberation of Palestine? More of a general outlook. Yeah.
So maybe I'll speak specifically about Egypt regarding that. So I think the key point to understand what is the role of the oppression of the Arab countries or Egypt as an example, or in other scenario would be the liberation, is that two simple contradictions. One contradiction is that this settler colonial project is totally against the interest, whether it's the geopolitical interest or any kind of interest for majority of the Arab population and the majority of the Egyptian population. And at the same time of that, like that is a long-standing fact, and it will be always the fact whether the Egypt is running by the Egyptian president, even if the Egyptian president is coming from the Mossad, it's still a fact that that project is against the interest of that countries on all levels. The other part that contradicts that the most standing treaty between in the Middle East is a peace treaty, or the Camp David Accord between Egypt and Israel. Like things happen in the region, the coalitions formed and destroyed, and a new coalition, and that accord is still there. It's the most long-standing one. That contradiction, I think, is the key to the thread to understand how is that happening. Because at the peak of the fight for the cause, the manifestation of that contradictions get reflected on the most weak part in the equation, which is in that case the Palestinians, and more specifically the Palestinians in Gaza now. So I think that that's how I imagine how one can understand that relation. And at the end of the day, regarding what we can...
Hi, Tom.
Hello? Should I continue? Okay. I can hear my echo. Okay. That's confusing. All good? Okay. So yeah, I think that's like you have the Arab Egypt is contributing to the siege of Gaza. You have Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates and so on from that camp is making like a way for the goods to enter Israel and so on. So as long as that countries is ruled by compradors and agents for the imperialist powers, it will keep playing in the same way for oppressing the Palestinians, which is the heart of the colonial project inside the region. So, yeah.
All right, and do you think there's a way to maybe from here exert pressure on the Egyptian dictatorship?
At the end of the day, that dictatorship has only three options now. Either to let Palestinians die inside Gaza, or to accept whether it likes it or not, whether the regime likes it or not, to accept the displacement of the Palestinians, or to intervene basically by allowing the aid to enter and allowing anything, and I mean anything, to enter. But I cannot see any other way. So the only way to put pressure from here actually is to put pressure on opening the Rafah Crossing or breaking the siege on Gaza. And at the end of the day, in the big image, there is only one solution that people here have been chanting in the streets for the last 4 months, is when they chant only one solution, Intifada revolution. So it's at the end, that's how I can see things can go on. Yeah.
All right, thank you. So Lina, we will get back to you now. Does it work now? Can you say something?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, I had to take a call from Tom, who's connecting us. So I'm sorry if I interrupted you.
No, so perfect. So if you now maybe want to continue or start again with Germany's role in Egypt, yeah, that would be great.
I think Egypt is one of the largest recipients of German development money. We're talking about like 1.6 billion euros in loans and subsidies. Also, there is major German business and investments happening in Egypt. Various large companies are basically operating here. You know, Henkel, Knauf, Leoni, many different big companies, and you know there is also major arms sales happening. I think there was a major increase in arms sales to Egypt in a period up until 2018. In the sense like it's more than doubled compared to a period before the revolution during Mubarak's time, actually. So these are the major and predominant aspects of German relations with Egypt, and they govern the political relation by and large. Up until the war in Gaza, the only deviant, let's say, political engagement from Germany with Egypt, given this overall broader, very tight bilateral relations, the only deviance was manifested in Germany being very vocal about human rights in Egypt, which, you know, now we learn more than ever. We knew, but, you know, we saw it in a glaring way during this war, that, you know, you can't just be a human rights defender you cannot be a defender of human rights in Egypt and support a genocide, not just be supportive of genocide, but almost complicit in it, as we mentioned at the beginning of the panel. So there have been also some tensions between the human rights community and the German government and the German Foreign Service in terms of defunding defunding people who support the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian right to statehood, amongst other things that I won't get into. So that leaves us with a situation where we have a fully aligned German government with the current Egyptian government, without any deviance by virtue of Germany claiming to support human rights, the current government at least. And yeah, so this is what this is the bare truth that is important to know from day one, and it's important for us to understand that while we sometimes use the German or broader European or Western defense of human rights as a tool for us to fight our fights, it's also important to understand today that it is those broader economic and political ties that govern the relations between the two countries, and a lot of the times we end up being used for washing more than anything else. So yeah.
And yeah, maybe to get back to the question of media and journalism in Egypt. Do you think there's a way that we can support it from here?
I think we should support each other by amplifying each other's voices, by witnessing and witnessing each other's struggle. It's very important for us also in Egypt to know what's happening in Germany in terms of community that's supporting Palestine, in terms of community, in terms of the diasporic communities that are also supporting us back here in Egypt. And I expect something similar, solidarity, witnessing, amplification, You know, the best thing that happens whenever we get into trouble for something that we publish is that, you know, it gets more known, it gets more read. So let's reach, share, amplify, engage. I think that's the most important thing, and I think that this is the only thing left for us in this war. You know, how is it possible to, you know, have a global solidarity movement, a people-to-people movement across borders and so on?
All right, thank you so much, Lina. It was very insightful. We now, or in a moment, we will open the space for discussion. But before we do that, everyone can take 2 or 3 minutes to talk to your neighbor and maybe digest a bit what you have heard. Maybe already think of a question that you might have to one of our guests. And then, yeah, we will have 2 discussion rounds. Right. All right, then let's proceed with the discussion. We will hand over the microphone to those who would like to ask a question. We will also try to consider those who joined us online. Yeah, who has a question or a comment or remark?
So my question is to Lina, which is mainly about, well, you being in Egypt and having a lot more insight than us here in exile. I, for instance, haven't been back in Egypt in 6 years or something. And I guess I've been wondering or questioning sometimes whether what we have been doing here is impactful in terms of putting pressure on Egypt or the Egyptian regime, like the demonstrations that have been organized in front of Egyptian embassies in several countries, like what we have done here or in the US or in the UK or recently in Lebanon as well. And well, of course, for me, it's a particularly confusing situation, because in the past, pressure could have worked because, I don't know, it would be, I don't know, about the human rights situation in Egypt, etc., things that, you know, the international community is more invested in, allegedly. But yes, right now, of course, the question of putting pressure from outside when the international community has the exact opposite interest in that sense. So yeah, I would love to hear from you what you think, and if also people in Egypt have been actually, you know, hearing about what is going on, what Egyptians outside of Egypt have been doing. Yeah, is it having any impact at all?
Do you want us to answer the questions one by one, or do we take a few?
You can maybe ask
the answer right away if you want.
Okay. So thank you for your question. I don't feel like it's useful in this moment of major repression and excessive authoritarianism to think about our roles as you know, as categories on their own. I think that we each do something from our different positions with the different tools that we have, and this together, the assemblage of these different things, what the diasporic groups are doing in Germany and other countries, and the few independent media voices here, the few human rights organizations here, are what these are doing. The assemblage of all these things are creating at least a discourse that is here to stay and that is picking up with time. And this is what matters, that it's also picking up, that, you know, more people are listening in, needing to hear a different voice. And, you know, what everyone is doing in that context is useful. So certainly I would keep going, doing what I'm doing. In terms of to what extent Egyptians are aware of what folks here are doing, the problem is with the Egyptian migration and diaspora in the mainstream consciousness is associated with economic migration, is more than political migration, associated with remittances and the economic crisis. So eyes are on these communities more than anything else. But, you know, there have been actions that are resonating. There have been actions that are circulating. You know, a lot of us here, those of us who are, you know, watching you very closely, we, you know, sit back and also feel like even some envy that we cannot engage in any public action given the restrictions that are there here. So you're being watched, you're being witnessed, we're helping each other, and we should keep going.
All right, thank you. Is there any other question from the audience? Any comment?
Can you hear me now? Okay, it's better, I think. Well, thank you very much to all of you for the very interesting discussion. And I've got a question for all of you, but more specifically for Lina, maybe, because she's right now in Egypt. I'd be interested in the role of Sisi in the ceasefire negotiations in light of the holy months of Ramadan, and how is it discussed publicly in Egypt? Is he interested in having a major role in that? And maybe for you too, the question of the day after. Maybe it's not the right occasion today, because we're concentrating catastrophic situation right now. But where would you see the role of not only Egypt, but the countries around in the region for the day after, speaking of a two-state solution or any other solution? What can we do in order to enforce that in Germany towards our government, but also towards other actors here in Germany, but also in Europe? Thank you.
All right, do you maybe want to start, Lina, and then Yara and Bishoy can continue?
So Egypt is actively engaged, of course, in the ceasefire negotiations. So there was, as we speak, there was a meeting in Doha as part of the ongoing meetings, and also Egypt is heavily engaged with the Paris-mediated talks as well, aiming at what we've heard in media leaks to be a possible 40-day ceasefire starting Ramadan, including the release of prisoners and so on. Of course, Egypt has a vested interest to play a big role. I think Egypt has a history of garnering an important bit of political legitimacy in brokering ceasefires in Gaza in particular, which is a much more complex task right now with the scope of this war, and also with the fact that we've been talking about that Egypt has its own vulnerabilities right now in terms of its economic position and so on. That being said, it is playing a big role, and aiming to reap some gains out of this engagement. I don't know what to say about the day after, to be honest. For me, as someone living here, of course, we're all thinking of the day after on a macro level. What's going to happen to Palestine? What's going to happen to Gaza? What's going to happen to the two-state solution and so on? But for me, is the day after is when the fire stops. Who's going to pay the price for so much injustice, and what's going to happen to so much displacement that has already happened? We have Palestinian displacement has become a fait accompli today. People. Yara mentioned the situation in the north. Even if the Israelis allegedly said that during the Rafah operation people can move north, but move to where exactly? There is no infrastructure. There are no houses. There is like the north part of the city has been completely wiped out. So I feel like for me this is the day after that I'm wondering about before thinking of macro solutions that may give some sense of sustainability to Palestinian lives. We will be spending a lot more time grappling with the amount of losses and dehumanization that we've seen throughout these past few months.
All right. Does any of you maybe want to add to that? Don't know who wants to start.
I would agree that it's quite difficult to think of the day after. I think because you also mentioned or asked about the role of Germany and how we can pressure Germany to stop emboldening Israel to continue. And I think this is a question I think we've all been asking ourselves for the past 4.5 months. And I think one of the things is trying to disrupt the flow of goods, of the arms supply. Trying to go into unions so the people that are handling these arms, are producing them, shipping them, whatever, they stop. so this is for me, I mean, the first question, and then I think afterwards, 1-2 states, I personally think that you currently have de facto a one state, which is controlled by Israel. So, I mean, Germany keeps adhering to this illusion of 2 states, but you know, it's like this lip service which they're adhering to, just like all the other things. It's not actually something they even work to seeing because they're not doing anything for it. So I think this is a discussion maybe for way later, but at the moment we in Germany have to focus on what we can do to stop, and in the long run also, what Lina was saying, Palestinians have been dehumanized to such an extent, also here in Germany, and yeah, I think this is the work that has to be done now before we can speak about the day after, and that will help also with, you know, seeing sort of the next step to a liberated Palestine is the work that also we do now, right? Yeah.
I want to agree with Lina that Egypt is engaged heavily in the ceasefire negotiations, but at the end it's engaged in a way that it's trying to see how it can get benefits from a ceasefire proposal. What is the maximum benefits that they can get, that the ruling class can get out of it? And that's not the first time. That regime has been in power in Egypt during previous 2 wars, and we know how they dealt with the ceasefire proposals, like the 2012 example, or even the 2019 example, where like even the Israeli media was talking about how much Egypt was very much interested in taking benefits from the program of reconstruction of Gaza. So yeah, that's how they are dealing with the ceasefire negotiations. Regarding the day after the ceasefire, I think what we should be focusing on and working on is how to empower Palestinians to have the faith of the decisions that will be after the ceasefire, to have their, like, at the end, the day after is for them. It's their day after. They should be able to decide how it will look like. That's what we should work on, empowering them to be able to do that. But that's so we should focus on the question on how we can empower them to do that. But that's like a big question that we have been all asking each other since the beginning of the war, what we can do.
Right, thank you. Are there any other questions from the public, or maybe from those following online?
Thank you very much. I have a question to all of you, but specifically to our Egyptian comrades. We've been talking about the Sisi and the regime, and I mean, I don't expect anything at the end of the day. But my question is, what do you expect from the people? Like, we saw millions, if not millions, hundreds of thousands in Yemen, in Jordan, but where are the people in Egypt? Why there is no enough people on the street, no enough political pressure? How is your estimate about the reaction of the people? Because this is what I count on, actually. Yeah, especially in regard to what you said, about the intersectionality and how, the people are also part of it. I mean, Egypt as well. So what are the people still waiting for? Maybe you could elaborate more about this. Thank you.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead, Lina?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to hear from Bishoy as well, but I think the answer is that it's really not possible to operate in the street in Egypt nowadays. The cost is really too high. People think the journalists at Mada are very brave, but we're not brave enough to be on the streets. We know that a simple action can land us long prison sentences, and we have seen this with our comrades, and we've seen like the very small gestures landing them a life in prison, and it should never be the case. I think Palestine protests are particularly sensitive to the authorities here because we have a history because of this very intersectionality of Palestine protests turning into protests against the local conditions, again because of the complicity and all these different things. So and this is what was happening in the early 2000s. It all started. I mean, the Egyptian revolution, for me, we can historicize it in different ways, but one of the ways in which we can historicize it is to take it back to simply the early 2000s when we were protesting for Palestinians and with Palestinians during Second Intifada, and then it became shortly after the slogan became "Down with Mubarak." So this is a nightmare that the authorities don't want to see again. And that's why the restrictions are very high. But in a more straightforward answer to your question, where are the people? They're here. They are talking about Palestine. They are thinking about Palestine. It's funny because we live in the age of capitalism, so we've been living in the age of capitalism for long, but also because capitalism is what the main thing that's prevailing right now. So the most actually public action that people are doing here is the boycott. People feel like maybe the right of citizenship and protesting and civil rights have been taken away from them, but they continue to have the power of being consumers, and hence we have a very active boycott campaign that is not super organized, I would say, but at the same time it's super widespread, and it speaks of a major sense of engagement, and it's all categories, all classes, school kids, workers, everyone, so yeah, the people are here. We need to take back the state, but I don't know when or how.
Yeah, do you want to add to that, Bishoy?
Yeah, I just want to add, there is two main points here. The first one is also the economical situation in Egypt is you cannot imagine it really. And that plays a huge role on what people can do. Of course, that's not the only point, but that has to be taken into consideration. The other point, people are really starving in Egypt. It's really in a really, really bad situation. The other one is the level of oppression. I don't know if you can imagine that for the last 10 years, people, if you are entering the stadium, football stadium with Palestinian flag, you will most likely get arrested. So it is to that extent. You cannot raise it. People even who went to Egypt during the call for the convoy, just when they showed up a Palestinian flag in the street, the police stopped them, and it was crazy. So that's how it looks like now. But I want to also put side note, maybe a bit far from your question, but whoever win in war, his logic dominates, and that's what's happening in Egypt and regarding Israel. So Egypt now is some like I have tried to a bit to think about why people felt there was a general feeling in Egypt after 7th of October of solidarity of a different way, and that was because at the end settlers are settlers, and yeah, Egypt has some sort of settlers. It's still inside the national shape, but at the end, some people in Egypt, some class, wouldn't mind welcoming the Israeli tanks in the downtown of Egypt, if that will just save their wealth or their privileges or their lifestyle. So I think the fight is intersectional in a way that it's also not just that they will go in demos for solidarity with Palestine, but also on ground to materialistically defeat that logic that also came to Egypt somehow. Because at the end, walls is walls and settlers are settlers. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Do we have more questions and comments?
Can I add, because you also mentioned the thousands of people in Jordan, and also, I mean, yes, you have people that are able to protest, but also these protests are massively, heavily militarized and policed. So this is also something, I think, in most of the Arab countries that, you know, you have this, what Bishai was talking about, this contradiction. And yeah, that's also, in a lesser extent, the case for Jordan, but it's also not particularly safe to go to these protests. Like, people get, you know, taken by the police and then disappear for a while, and yeah.
All right, anyone else?
Yes, someone said already that maybe boycotting is a good thing. I think this also on the international level could be a very useful weapon, like to isolate Israel, and especially to target companies who make business with Israel. We just talked about the arms industry, like in Germany, Rheinmetall, or other companies like Deal Defense, but there are also many, many other multinational corporations like Siemens, for example, or also like, you know, Starbucks, McDonald's. And I think if this would be a very big, broad international campaign, maybe this could like create some kind of pressure. And I think it's not completely impossible, because if you look back, for example, to the apartheid regime in South Africa, when there was a very big campaign against the multinational Shell, it was very kind of useful. And I think also now, if we do understand that Israel's apartheid regime, we can maybe use like similar methods they have used, like to really like to make this boycott campaign way bigger, way stronger, much more international. I know that in Germany it's not so easy, because especially here, the German left basically has completely failed. It's a very big shame, but maybe on the international level, and also here, there's a lot of many activists who are not from Germany, are not Germans, and thanks to all of you, we can like raise this pressure on that level.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any more questions, comments from the audience?
We do have 2 questions from the chat. I will read them one after the other, and then you guys can decide which is more interesting to answer. They are mainly directed to our Egyptian comrades. One is, are you aware or know of any Zionist positions and opinions in Egypt too? And the other is, have you heard about the Liberty March that will start on March the 2nd from Cairo to Rafah? And how likely do you think that it will be let through?
Yeah, I mean, feel free to answer both or just one. And yeah, I don't know who wants to start. Lina, do you want to start, or do you want to say anything at all to those questions, or do you?
Yeah, there is pro-Zionist stances in Egypt. It exists. And as I said, yeah, there is people in Egypt who would welcome the Zionist tanks in downtown Egypt. But at the end, that's not the majority. And it's a specific class that, like, I describe them as the local settlers of Egypt, who would, like, yeah, welcome them just because at the end, also that idea of resistance and of is very dangerous to some people in Egypt. It threatens their privileges and threatens their lifestyle, and that whole model is very, they are very skeptical about it, and for them it's very dangerous. So yeah, there is extreme pro-Zionist opinions in Egypt as well. Like the Farid Khamis, who is one of the big bourgeois people in Egypt, has once said that the most threat on Egypt is the intelligentsia, not Israel, but the intelligentsia. So yeah, you can expect a lot. You have the guy who's taking bribes from people to enter Gaza. That's Egyptian as well. He's not. So it depends at the end on the interest. Regarding the Liberation March, yeah, people will go on Saturday. We have been in contact with them as Egyptian Diaspora Resists. There is not much to say. At the end of the day, as Lina said, like, people can't enter North Sinai. It's very hard. All the transportations are owned by the intelligence that goes to North Sinai. But we are hoping on, we are putting our hope on some pressure on the regime by having that. So don't put much hopes, but we try to do our best regarding that, but don't expect much.
Yeah, do you want to add to that, Lina or Yara? All right. Do you?
Maybe regarding what was said about boycott before, I think it's an extremely powerful thing. That's why it's trying to be shut out also in Germany, and stigmatizing it and almost criminalizing it. I think it might also be in the future criminalized. The BDS movement, or in general calling for boycotting. Germany has lots of things that need to be boycotted, like Heidelberg Cement, which is a very big cement factory that operates in the occupied West Bank. Lots of things like weapons. And yeah, I think it's something that when targeted can be effectful and affect change. But yeah, it's being, I mean, the BDS movement in Germany is very small and very heavily criminalized and stigmatized, because also they know that this is a threat. This can be a threat to them if this is a mass move, if it becomes a mass movement.
All right, thank you, Yara. Are there any more questions or comments? I think we would have room for one or two more. Yeah. Anyone? There is one more question. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe one other question regarding the elephant in the room. Speaking of the United States and their positioning towards the war against Palestinians. So what I would like to know from all of you three is also in light of the upcoming US elections I mean, we know the positioning of the current US president, but it could get even much worse than that. So what are your perspectives on that? And I guess very pessimistic, as I'm personally very pessimistic about that, but it could it could turn to a regional conflict, swept to a regional conflict. And I think more than that, as we don't have a EU positioning in that regard, so the US positioning will be even more important in the future. And do you see any sort of coalition on the other side to support the Palestinian deed? Because as I was previously asking, and thank you very much also for your input that we have to amplify the Palestinian voices now, but what is the role of the United States from your point of view, and is there an alliance, a coalition for the Palestinians on the other side? Do you see a light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, who wants to go ahead with this?
Yeah, I honestly I'm quite pessimistic, because between the Democrats and the Republicans in terms of Palestine, it's like pest and cholera, or in general in terms of, you know, imperialistic wars, whether that's, you know, more drones or bombing under Obama than under Trump. But yes, when it comes to Palestine, Trump, before he did the move of the embassy, he, you know, he did things that were a bit worse. But we see under Biden that he hasn't changed the embassy. He hasn't, you know, moved it back to Tel Aviv. And so I don't, honestly, I don't think that whatever the outcome of the election, I see that, I think Biden has lost immensely, like a lot of voters now, especially in Arab communities, and yeah, unfortunately, I don't see, like, coming from the U.S., I don't see that there is any, like, in any circumstance will there be someone in power that is putting Palestinian people before their colony, which is Israel, like their imperial, you know, their imperial interests. Which are very, like, deep-rooted. So, yeah.
Lina, do you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, no, I don't have much to add. I don't want to engage in further, you know, in what we all know. I think there is a political crisis everywhere, and, you know, the facts that, you know, reformist politics are not going to do justice for Palestine is a sign for, you know, the need for different kinds of politics altogether, because there is a crisis of the left everywhere, and even the center, and all of that. Am I pessimistic? I think you know, the world order will stay as it is, but at the same time, it would be shameful that what we've lived through in the last few months would not at least help nativize or sort of give birth to you know, new forms of organized politics that, you know, are really committed to progressive values. You know, and you know, I have hope that there's a possibility for that.
All right, Bishop, is there anything that you would like to add? No, okay. Is there any more? Are there any more questions or comments from the audience? Yeah, I think there is one more.
So I would like to ask about the declaration of the Egyptian government for the company Hala, or Yahala, I don't remember. Because the line in Egypt in front of the office is very big, and if you pay the 5,000, it doesn't matter how old you are, a patient or not, and for minors is 2,500 officially. So how they declare that as official thing, and the people are a lot in front of the office, it's not something that nobody know about it.
Yeah, who would like to answer that or wants to answer to the question? Lina, is there something you would like to say about that, or Bishoy, or Yara?
Read the story, I would say. It maybe gives a bit of insight about, you know, this official, non-official status of the company and you know, facilitated passage of Palestinians across the border, provided they pay. This kind of, they call it coordination, tansiq. So this kind of coordination predated the war. But of course, what happened during that war is, you know, none other than war profiteering because of how the numbers skyrocketed. But also, you know, if you know, I guess if your question is the government denying it? No, it's not. You know, the Yahala's coordination services are, you know, officially acknowledged at the crossing. Like if you're crossing through the Rafah border crossing, and if you're crossing through Yahala services, there is, you know, a mark within the border crossing that says if you are coordinating with Yahala, you go through that line. So, I mean, it is official in that sense, you know. It's official, the company is registered, and so on. So yeah, I mean, it's yeah, it's official in that sense. Nobody's trying to say that it's hidden or it's a secret, or no, it's this is the problem. It's also recognized as, you know, an official rite of passage if you have the money.
All right, thank you. Do you want to add? Or?
No, just from a few days ago, I was talking to someone in front of that huge line in front of Hala. It was really huge. I didn't expect it to be that long. But, and people, actually what I hear that people were asking the people in the line, why is that line? And people was even afraid to say, why is that line? So, and no one is denying anything. Like the company, it has very fancy, I saw the images, it has very fancy headquarters actually in Cairo. So, yeah, and they are not talking to the Egyptians regarding that. Like they don't respect us, so they don't talk to us about this stuff. Yeah.
Okay, I would close the discussion now. I would give the chance to all of you, if you have some closing remarks, to give them now. You're not obliged, of course, but if you want to say something to our audience, feel free. Is there anything, Yada, Bishoy, or Lina, that you would want to say that hasn't been said yet, but that you deem important?
Maybe just see you in the streets on 2nd of March, please.
All right. Yeah, then that's that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lina. It has been really a great honor to have you with us tonight, and that you could make it rather spontaneously. And yeah, all the best to you, really. Yeah, maybe we can have like another or similar event like this in the future. And yeah, thank you, Bishoy. Thank you, Yada, for your inputs as well. Yeah, if you're interested in in the work of Palästina Kampagne or Egyptian Diaspora Resists, you can contact us. And otherwise, yes, Bishoy said, see you on the streets or see you in the bar. If you want, you can take a drink over there and maybe continue the discussion there. Yeah, thank you and good evening.